2023 revealed quite a bit about the state of the movie industry. With massive flops of the established formula, mainly referring to superhero movies, audiences turned towards unlikely places to get their silver screen fix. Of course, I'm talking about video game movies, which is still really weird to say out loud. The likes of Mario and Five Nights at Freddy's educated studios big and small that these games can turn a profit while also being generally good. However, I'm not gonna say that a video game curse was lifted, cause 2023 wasn't even the year of that. If we're talking films exclusively, then that goes to 2019 with Detective Pikachu, but if TV shows are in the equation, then that goes even farther back. All of this to say that whether you like it or not, the next wave of Hollywood blockbusters will be video game adaptations, and if you don't believe me, then look at a list of upcoming video game films announced. Studios are scrambling for rights and trying to get that next golden goose, but I'm not here to talk about that today. Plenty of people have already discussed the implications of these trends, and my hat doesn't need to be thrown into that ring, but one of those film announcements did get my attention. Sega, after the wild success of the Sonic movie, gave tidbits to the public that they were planning on making more films with their other franchises, one of these being the Yakuza series. This is such a fantastic idea. Like a Dragon already has great character-driven dramas that weave excellent stories that already feel cinematic in nature. And let's not forget the comedy and action of these games, karaoke and bear fights and all. Coupled with the amount of entries in the series, it's a perfect pick! So long as they learned from the other films. Oh yeah, Sega has done this before, so let's talk about them. After all, Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth just came out, so let's go back to the start of the series where nobody knew what the fuck they were doing! So like I just mentioned, there are indeed multiple Like a Dragon films, two in fact. One of them is a lot more interesting than the other, but I wanted to briefly discuss some other visual media that the franchise has had before going into the lesser of the two movies. In 2016, there was a 4-episode miniseries called Like a Dragon Poem of the Soul. Not much is known about this, and I can't find any full episodes anywhere. I've heard that it apparently has nothing to do with the video games, but that's only hearsay. I guess I'm just putting this here as a shout out to anyone who has access to any of these episodes to reach out. But when talking about TV shows, I was referring to the 2 seasons of Like a Dragon that aired from 2010 to 2012. The first season of the show was called Black Panther: Like a Dragon New Chapter, adapting the events of the Japanese exclusive PSP game of the same name. In the same way, the second season was called Black Panther 2: Like a Dragon Ashura Chapter, adapting its own PSP sequel as well. Now, I'm not gonna pretend I knew these games, let alone this show, existed before making this video, but I have been told that these games are cult favorites among the Like a Dragon fandom. Enough that in recent years, both games have received fan translations into English, which is great to hear. The same, however, cannot be said about the show. While I did see some efforts online, most people haven't made it past an episode or two, which got me curious. So I watched a bit of the first episode and man, I just can't get through it. I'm not gonna make any wide sweeping statements cause this is literally all I watched, but I'm a shower, not a teller, so I want to play an unedited clip for you of what I witnessed and I want you to guess why I couldn't get through it. So if you're ready, here's an unedited clip for your viewing pleasure. So, did you figure out what it was? If you said anything along the lines of "the editing made me nauseous," then you'd be correct. Look, I can't judge this show on this clip alone, but I physically couldn't bring myself to watch the rest of it. If these are how the action scenes are done, then I did myself a favor. I would highly recommend that if you are curious, play the games instead. They seem really fun, and from the synopsis I found, it is the classic Yakuza drama that we know and love. So, in terms of other stuff, I'm trying to think if there's any... Oh yeah, there was a Yakuza 1 stage play. And the fact that it is better documented and available online than some major Broadway plays is insane and a conversation for another day. As someone who likes plays, that is so fucking crazy to me. But that's enough distractions for now. The year is 2006, and this is where our first of 2 films resides. A direct-to-DVD production called Like a Dragon Prologue. To put some perspective on this, only the first game was out at this point. Yakuza 2 wouldn't release for another 2 months. So this movie only had the first game to go off of, and it decides to be a prequel. I think this is a wise initial choice, because the backstory of Kiryu, Akira, and Yumi, while defined, has some room for changes. I mean, look at Yakuza 0. So, let's give them the benefit of the doubt and see what they can do. After a brief montage introduction, the short film opens with a Yakuza scuffle in the middle of town. Gunfire is shot, and multiple people are brutally killed, including the parents of this little girl named Yumi. We then cut to Sunflower Orphanage, where Yumi is brought to by Kazuma. He's part of the Dojima clan and is the surrogate father to our main character Kiryu. Speaking of which, this is where we get to meet him, along with Akira and his little sister Yuko. This stuff kinda plays out similarly to a lot of these stories. Yumi is reluctant at first, but grows to love the orphanage and her new friends. Nothing too crazy going on here. Some years pass, and Kiryu and Akira grow up and start getting into more fights. This doesn't really sit well with Yumi, but all of this is brushed over when Yuko becomes ill and needs to go to the hospital. Kazuma covers the bill and shows a side of the Yakuza that the boys really haven't considered. After all, they are all orphans of the Yakuza, implying that these kids are all related to Dojima killings. Regardless, both Kiryu and Akira leave the orphanage to join the Dojima clan under Kazuma. We then time skip again to the 1990s, where Kiryu and Akira are serving well in the city of Kamurocho. There's brotherhood and good times between the two, and things are even better when Yumi comes back into town. She wears a keepsake ring that Kiryu gave to her before joining the Yakuza, and we get an idea that these two have feelings for each other. They help her get a job at a local bar, and man, we are really rushing to the end here, aren't we? Like, I'm not trying to say anything, but this part is verbatim what you would expect. Anyways, Kiryu has hustled enough money to go to Kazuma and start his own family, but this meeting is interrupted with a phone call informing that Yumi has been kidnapped by the Dojima patriarch. Kiryu runs into the chairman's office to help and finds a crime scene. Yumi is absolutely traumatized to what's happened to her. The patriarch is shot dead, and Akira killed him. Obviously, this is a huge no-no, and Akira is in some deep shit, especially since his sister is still in treatment. Kiryu decides to take the fall for both of them and tells them to leave before the police show up. Akira then drives Yumi to the hospital while Kiryu is locked up. That doesn't really last long though, as she runs away immediately back to Sunflower Orphanage, which is old and decrepit now. And yeah, this is where the plot picks up from the game. The movie flashes a montage of gameplay footage while Kiryu is in prison for 10 years, and that's about it. I am well aware that this was kind of a shallow synopsis, but there really isn't much to say about this movie. I mean, that's why I called it the lesser of the two films. Nothing of note was here, there wasn't any crazy changes or risks taken, heck, there wasn't even much action. Nothing that makes the Like a Dragon series special was present here. But Mr. Bear, it's a direct adaptation, so what more could you ask for? If it is telling a story told directly in the games, how can you say it has no substance? Well, when you transfer a story from one medium to another, there comes a caveat that the perspective of the player transfers from a controller to an observer. This type of backstory works well because you are experiencing it and feeling it through the perspective of Kiryu. With this, it just feels like a B-list drama you'd find on TV during the day. But I'm probably reading into this too deeply, as I'm sure this was an afterthought for Sega. This was extra supplementary content. None of this was supposed to be consumed as a replacement to Yakuza 1. It is a curiosity and a novelty at best. However, we do have one more film to go over, and it's the one you may have heard of before. 2007's Like a Dragon, the movie. Now this movie is the more interesting, well-made, and talked about of the two adaptations. Whereas Like a Dragon Prologue looked like it was a fan film, Like a Dragon the movie is a full-blown production. I've seen bits and pieces of this flick before making this video, but this was the first time I took a moment to sit down and watch the full thing. What motivated me to do such a thing? Well, I figured out that this movie was directed by none other than Takashi Miike.
Born in 1960 in the Osaka Prefecture of Japan, Takashi Miike started his film journey under the apprenticeship of one Shohei Imamura. Known for his volatile and raw depictions of Japanese society, Miike would take his teacher's world and raise the stakes in his own creative journey. In his mind, a world which you can watch with pleasure is innately uninteresting. The discomfort you feel as an observer is the sign of true art. Nowhere is this more prevalent than in Ichi the Killer, an adaptation of the manga of the same name. Grotesque in nature and objectively disgusting to look at, the film hammers in this discomfort with the idea of the desensitization of violence. It was subsequently banned in multiple countries and plagued with cuts in others, including the United States. With that said, the bear understood the gravity of a Like a Dragon film directed by Miike.
This juggernaut of a director motivated me single-handedly to watch this film. I mean, if it's good enough for Travis Touchdown, then it sure as hell is good enough for me. It seems like a match made in heaven. Miike makes violent, crude films with underlying deep themes and complexity, and Like a Dragon is a violent, crude series with underlying deep themes and complexity. I'd venture to say that this could be the first perfect pick of a director to adapt a video game, so let's see how he did. Like a Dragon the movie is a very loose adaptation of the first game's story, and by loose, I mean really loose. Like, comparing the two, the only commonality you'll find is a few major story beats and characters. Heck, the whole movie thing takes place in one hot night in Kamurocho, which is a huge departure from the game. If you're going to watch this with the intention of getting a faithful Yakuza 1 movie, then just stop right here. However, ignoring that, what you do get is, at least in my opinion, a pretty enjoyable film. The movie is told with 4 main vignettes. They don't really cross over with each other that much, but they are enjoyable in their own right. The first one we see is with these 2 comedic bank robbers holding these workers hostage. Cops are outside trying to figure out what to do, while these bumbling idiot robbers are trying to figure out what to do themselves. Both sides are equally incompetent, and as the film goes on, it's fun checking in on them to see how they're doing. Out of the 3 stories, this one serves as our comedic grounding. The second vignette we are introduced to involves a young couple named Satoru and Yui. I don't think they are from the games at all. The closest thing I can think of is Takashi and Kyoka, but I'll be honest and say it's been a while since I played Yakuza 1, but I'm pretty sure that these are new characters for the film. Anyway, their whole gimmick is that Yui's a psychopath and gets on this stealing spree with Satoru. It progressively gets more and more heated as the film goes on, and you start to suspect that maybe she's doing this for a reason. I think out of the 4 stories, this is the weakest one. Honestly, I think it comes down to the performances from the actors. It just got grating after a while, and I wanted to see what the other characters were doing. Our third vignette is the shortest one of them all, and I'm kinda hesitant to even call it a vignette. There really isn't much of a story or an arc for the people in it. Basically, a Korean hitman is in town and he wants to assassinate Jingu, who is responsible for the Tojo clan's missing 10 billion yen. This apparently is for the good of Japan and all that, and that's basically it. You occasionally see this guy pop up in the story, but there is no arc with him, he's just there. However, the cool thing I wanted to bring up with this particular sub-story is the 2 actors that are a part of it. The Korean assassin, who is named Park, is played by Gong Yo, who is that creepy recruiter guy from Squid Game. Pretty cool. But I'm not done yet! Jingu, who is for some reason called Mr. N in this movie, is played by Toshihiro Nagoshi, the creator of Like a Dragon and Super Monkey Ball. Neat bit of trivia, but let's move on to our 4th and main vignette of this movie. Kiryu, who just got out of his 10-year prison sentence, has come across a young girl named Haruka. She is the daughter of Mizuki, who is the sister of Yumi, Kiryu's old love interest. Kiryu is determined to help Haruka find her mother, but oh, if it were so simple. This movie has to have conflict, and that's where Goro Majima comes in. He is hands down the best character in this film. Perfect casting all around. This is the defining best part of Like a Dragon the movie. Everything the Yakuza games are is distilled and packaged into this one man for an experience worth all its weight in gold. He steals every scene he is in, whether it's his choreography in the fights or his comedic demeanor with his henchmen and others around him. I'm convinced that Miike put all of his effort into Majima, and damn it, it kinda works. I'm gonna be completely honest with you guys, it's worth watching this movie solely for Majima. But what about the entire picture? Well, I'll start with the good. Like a Dragon the movie is not a boring film by any stretch of the imagination. You will be entertained, and I'd be shocked if you went away from watching this without some value. Unlike Like a Dragon Prologue, this movie embraces its heritage and delivers what fans would want on a surface level, even without including the fan service. Action? There is plenty of that to go around. Miike is the king of this kind of stuff, and the fights are truly eye candy. Comedy? Boatloads. If you like slapstick and witty one-liners, you will have a field day. Again, Miike's style of humor really shines here in this environment. Drama? Well, that's the weak one and the Achilles heel of this production. If you turn your brain on for any point during this film, the plot crumbles. That's the weakness of having this 4-vignette structure. Everything feels disjointed and, in turn, the pacing is bad. Not bad in the way that things drag, but rather everything feels rushed. This is a 2-hour film that is trying to adapt a 14-hour story. It gets to the point where the main villain of the movie comes out of nowhere and you're just expected to know that he's the guy. That's the rub. If you haven't played Yakuza 1, then I'd imagine you'd be lost if you even think about trying to understand what's going on. So when looking at the initial question that started this whole video, what can we learn from these films when trying to make a new Like a Dragon movie? Well, the problem lies within that juggling act. Yakuza is a lot of different things to a lot of different people, but the whole franchise can be broken into these 3 pillars: action, comedy, and drama. In my opinion, to make a successful representation of Like a Dragon, you need to equally balance these ideas out. If you can do that, then you are going to make a fantastic movie. But if you leave one of those out, then it's gonna feel empty and be forgotten with time, just like all of these adaptations were. Also, you really gotta make sure you get the pacing down correctly, because we all know nobody likes a rushed ending. Well, what are you still doing here? That's the end of the video. Go play Like a Dragon!